Well, let me jump right in. I'm going to tell you exactly how you might be teaching your dog to run slow and how you can fix that. So this is our first agility dog, Sammy the Rottweiler. And Sarah actually did agility for a whole year before I started in the sport. And here's how she got me hooked. So I get to tell the story. We were at a show, and I, who had never set foot in the ring, was giving her lots of really good advice on what she could do better.
Oh, great advice.
And she told me, you give it a try. And so I said, okay, I will. And I ran that Rottweiler in open, which is like intermediate level. It's not novice. You know, I didn't qualify, but I was hooked. So, of course, I had to get my own dog. Next thing you know, Sarah's flying back to Texas from New York with the most beautiful golden retriever puppy I had ever seen. Her name was Gypsy, and she was my first agility dog. All right, well, I've got some numbers here for you. Now, Gitche is the dog that I'm currently running, and Gypsy is the dog I just told you about. This is the yards per second for both jumpers and standard for Gypsy and Gitche at 20 inches. And you can see that Gitche is much faster than Gypsy was. This is their career average over their lifetime. You can see it's not really a fair comparison. For those of you who don't know, Gitche is an amazingly fast golden that I coned with Susan Frazier and Steve Matthews of Mandeville, Louisiana, and I train and run in agility. So she spends most of her time over there in Louisiana, and when she gets ready for Nationals, Westminster tryouts, she comes over here for several weeks or a few months and trains with me here. She actually just a couple of months ago, she almost won the AKC National Championship in the very competitive 20-inch class, taking third place, and that was by 0.76 seconds, so less than a second behind the winning Border Collie, so very proud of her effort. Now, there are obvious differences between the dogs in terms of size, drive, and athleticism. Not to mention, Gitche's got running contacts, and Gypsy had terrible contacts because, like a lot of you out there, I didn't know any better 15 years ago. But there's one key difference between these two dogs, and it happened because of the way that I trained them. I always wanted Gypsy to be right, but I wanted Gitche to be fast. So back to Gypsy, because I always wanted her to run clean, and I wanted to be clean in shows, even in practices. You know, I was very competitive. I wanted to win in practice. I rewarded her whenever she was right, and I punished her whenever she got it wrong, because back then, that's how we did it. We did a lot of shaming, right? She'd miss a contact. I'd say, oh, you bad girl, right? She misses a weave pull entry. No, let's try again. And back then, we'd keep trying until we got it right, even if the dog was going slower and slower, because that was the name of the game to me, getting it right, getting that clean run. I was teaching her that there was a lot of value in checking in with me in order to be correct. She wanted to be right, because that's what made me happy. And she wanted me to be happy because she's a wonderful golden retriever. That's what they do. In fact, this is what all dogs do, in my opinion. And so I was teaching her to be slow. Now, I didn't understand what I was doing to her until I was well on my way to becoming a doctor. You know, when you're a medical student or a new doctor, you're heavily supervised, so you don't accidentally kill people. And one of my supervisors was a pretty bad teacher. You know, if you did something right, she gave you lukewarm praise, right? Very reluctant. If you did something wrong or answered a question incorrectly, she acted like it was the end of the world, right? And that you were a stupid person who'd never be a good doctor. So what happened? Me and my fellow doctors, you know, we worked under her for a month. You do these rotations, you change every month. But within just a few days, we'd stop volunteering answers. We tried to avoid her at all costs, and we never did anything without checking with her first. She had taught us to be slow. I love this picture here, golden retriever, not one of mine. Is it a dog or is it a turtle? Well, it turns out that many people are unknowingly slowing their dogs down in the very same way that I did to Gypsy, and that this doctor did to all of us young doctors. And this doesn't happen just for very slow dogs that are barely making course time. This is an issue that affects even the very fastest dogs in our sport today. If you've got a fast dog, they can probably be a little bit faster. So how do we avoid this problem? Well, I want you to make your agility training like Disneyland for your dog. Your dog needs to feel safe from punishment Because if you're constantly worried about something bad that's going to happen, it's a lot harder to do your job quickly and correctly.
I love this picture because this is the field that we train on, and we have literally turned it into Disneyland in this picture.
Yeah, I like that too. And here we have my big training rules. So if you're going to come train with me, these are the house rules. And this is how we turn dogs with issues into dogs that shine on the agility field. You know, and all dogs have issues. You know, whether it's Sarah and Venture, I told you about Venture, whether it's Gitche, all dogs have their issues. So let's talk a little bit more about punishment. No physical or verbal punishment. I really want you to watch your body language. Don't stand over your dog. I see that a lot on start lines. You know, when dogs break the start line and the handler goes back and sits them again, they'll stand over them. It's very intimidating when someone stands over you. No dirty looks, no harsh words. This includes no reward marks. So most dogs are going to view no reward marks as punishers, even when the word is said calmly. You know, for myself, my no reward mark usually has some emotion behind it, right? Some negative emotion, so I don't use it. Someone did a very interesting study for her master's thesis where 27 dogs were taught to put 2 legs into a hoop on the floor. So, you know, a pretty simple trick. Half of them were clicker trained. The other half were also clicker trained, but they also heard a tone when they made a mistake. So now this tone, of course, is perfectly neutral, right? It's the middle C on a piano, right? So they play this tone. Because the argument that people will give you, or the argument that I'm giving you, right, is, oh, I can't use a no reward mark because I sound angry when I say it.
Because I can't do it well.
Because I can't do it well. Well, here they take all the emotion out of it because it's just a noise, an automatic sound that's made and generated. You know, so that's pretty interesting. Well, let's take a look at what happened. Who did better? Well, the dogs that were clicker trained only performed better. Those are the ones that didn't get any no reward marks. And so in my experience, it kind of agrees with that study. No reward marks are okay for some dogs, all right? Highly trained dogs, experienced dogs, but not for most dogs. So if you come to me, I'm usually going to recommend that you eliminate it from your training and see what happens. So remember, you always want to tailor your training to your dog.
Somebody wanted an explanation of no reward mark.
Oh, my apologies. So you're probably familiar with the basic idea of positive reinforcement. At the moment the dog is doing something that we want them to do, we're going to use a sound to mark that behavior. All right, and we're going to use most commonly a clicker. But if you don't have a clicker, you can say something. I like to say yes, right? So let's say my kids are really dirty, and then they go to the bathroom and they wash their hands, and I see them washing their hands. I'm going to say yes. And when I say yes, I'm going to slap a candy bar on the sink right next to them. They're going to be far more likely to repeat that behavior, especially in my presence, to see if they can get a candy bar out of it. Okay? And that's how we're going to use positive reinforcement to increase a behavior. So the no reward mark is exactly the opposite. So let's say they come in there and their hands are all dirty and they decide they're going to pick their nose. I say, oh, that's so disgusting. The moment I see that, I'm going to say no. I'm not going to give them anything, right? And they should know from me saying no, that no reward is coming.
And it doesn't mean punishment. It just means
no punishment.
You're not going to get a reward.
It's a dead end.
So what a lot of trainers will use is they'll use like an uh-oh or a whoops or an eh, you know, something like that. Those are typical no reward marks.
And the idea here, right, and the idea here is that the dog is going to not offer that behavior as frequently. It is like a dead end.
Right.
Try something else. Right. Offer me something
You're
else.
on the wrong track.
Right. So it's one of those things that
in theory
sounds really good, and in practice doesn't quite give you the results that you're looking for.
That's
so
right.
I'm really glad you asked that question. My apologies for not defining it. So aside from tailoring your training to your dog and really watching your body language and your verbals here, I really focus on increasing reward rate. You know, Sarah, in my opinion, I'm always saying this, right? What separates the good trainers from the great trainers?
It's reinforcement and rewards.
Reinforcement and rewards. You know, a lot of people are going to reach for things like, well, that guy's taller.
Right.
That guy's more athletic, right? that guy's dog is 1 inch taller than that dog. No, no, no. The real difference has happened in the training field. And this is something that I want to share with you guys. Use your transition time to cue simple behaviors. So what's a transition? Well, when you finish running a sequence, good or bad, and you go back to the start and do it again, the time from the end to the beginning, that's the transition time, that in-between time, that dead time. And it actually makes up the majority of your training, right? You run 20 obstacles in 45 seconds, you're done.
Yep.
That's it.
That's it.
But the time it takes for you to take your dog back, talk with your instructor, get some feedback, and give it another shot, that could be a minute or two, right? So 60, 70% of your time is not running time. It's transition time. And so what I like to do is use that transition time. Instead of talking to your instructor, your friends, you should be rewarding your dog. Hurry back to the start line for your next attempt. Shorten up that transition time. After a failure, how many of you out there, when your dog makes a mistake, they mess up a sequence, they fly off a contact or something, you purposely take your time going back to the start line because you want to let your dog know, hey, you messed up. You did something wrong, and I am dragging my feet on purpose to let you know that. You're trying to send your dog a message. A lot of people do that, and there's no need for that. And by definition, it's going to reduce your reward rate. And the story that I always like to tell, and I'm sure at least some of you out there have already heard it. If I'm a guy and I'm sitting on a bench with a beautiful woman, say, my wife here, Sarah, and I lean in for a kiss, and she leans away from me, I failed. There's no, I know that I've messed up somehow, right? I wasn't correct, okay? She doesn't have to give me a 5-minute timeout or drag her feet somewhere else, drag us off to some other location for me to understand that something hasn't gone right, okay? I know in the instant that the reinforcement is not there that I have messed up. And so when you're training your dog and they get something right and you're saying, yay, and you throw them a toy and you give them food within a couple of seconds, if there's ever a time they don't get that toy and food in a couple of seconds, they know something's gone wrong.
That's right. And somebody asked, how do you teach their dog what they did right and what they did wrong if you don't have markers? We do use markers for what they, when they get it right. And when they don't get that marker, when they don't get the reward, that's all the information they need to know that they've done it wrong. And then we really concentrate on rewarding what we want to see and jackpotting when everything is going right.
That's right. So these simple behaviors, what are they? What do I like to do? Hand touches, right? You have your dog touch your hand. They may do nose touches. They can touch your hand with their nose. You can sit. You can recall them. I'm not afraid to call my dog and then give them a treat. So let's say we mess up a sequence. Gitche drops 3 bars. I head back to the start line and I say, Gitche. She comes running toward me and I say yes, and I give her a treat. Now that yes and treat is not for all those bars she just dropped, but trust me, it's been long enough that she knows she's not being rewarded for those bars, because if she hadn't dropped those bars, we would be going on to the next part of the sequence. She knows right away something has gone wrong. But I use that in the transition to keep the reinforcement rate up. You can also use eye contact, and this works with food or with tugging. This way, even if your dog messes up a sequence, say 3 times in a row, they're still getting rewarded. And that usually is going to give you better drive and motivation.
And Chantel says, so you're saying reward frequently and excited when right, and when wrong, just ignore it and try again. That's basically it. That's how we like to run our training, because it is so important to keep our dogs' enthusiasm and drive up. It's the most important thing, way more important than being correct, because remember the story that we started out with. We don't want to teach our dogs that being correct is the most important thing. We want to teach our dogs that being fast and correct is the most important thing.
That's right. You need that speed element in agility. And this is a really big deal, because when agility first started, it was really a growth that kind of came from an expansion of and incorporated a lot of obedience. And obedience is very much, as practiced a long time ago in many parts of the world, an exercise in control. You knew exactly what routine you were going to do. It was the same routine every time, and your dog just had to do it. Okay. Agility is not like that. Everywhere you go, every time you run, the course is different. It's part of the reason that people love agility so much. You know, it's new, it's interesting, it's challenging. Not just when you first start in the sport, but every time you go. And so, you know, that's how the two sports are different. And Chantal, I was just like you, right? When I first learned dog training from obedience type instructors, I was taught you have to let the dog know that they are wrong. And it turns out that simply isn't true. And when I experimented with it myself with several different dogs, I found that my fast dogs became even faster, and that my slow dogs became fast, and that I took Gitche, who, you know, frankly wasn't even the fastest dog in her litter when she started with me, and turned her into really a national world-class type of dog, you know, the fastest golden retriever out there right now.
That's right. And Oscar mentioned taking the tiniest little break before reward. And he's obviously been watching our live show. That's exactly what I do. You have it exactly right. If my dog gets it right, there is like less than a second of a delay. And then I just say, get it, and let him get his toy.
All right. So here we have two trainers. We've got me and not me. Now our dogs are going to do the exact same sequence. They're going to mess it up the first 2 times, and they're going to get it right the 3rd time. And we're going to each take the same amount of time. Let's say it takes 2 minutes to try it 3 times. You can see that after my dog fails, I'm going to ask for simple behaviors: a recall, a hand touch, some spins, a sit. And every time my dog does those simple behaviors, I'm going to give them rewards. Now the other trainer, they're not doing anything during this transition time, so nothing. Now at the end, I'm going to give my dog a very nice reward, and I'm going to be very happy and enthusiastic about it. It's going to be a jackpot. Now the other trainer is going to be really exasperated, right? They're going to say, "Oh, finally, you got it right. Okay, here's a cookie." When you look at these two dogs, which dog do you think is going to be more motivated to keep training and run faster?
And you know, I'm familiar with this concept, but then seeing it in this chart, I love it. It is so very clear how important this is, and what a different experience it is for the dog. So don't be not me, be me.